everybody! This video will be about all kinds of interesting things and sites and updates about previously discussed interesting things and sites. Okay, let's start with a very simple question. What are the largest networks or systems of historic remains? Not necessarily ruins, all kinds of remains. So I will tell you my guesses, and if I'm wrong you can correct me on my forum. Now I have made it very easy to point out mistakes in my video because I do make such, and in the past it has been a bit difficult to report them. I think at least number one is sure. These are the rock-cut ruins, which cover an area bigger than a continent. We can't even speak of number of sites, it's impossible, because in the area where such ruins are present, basically almost every town and village has its own rock-cut part. I mean every modern town and village. We're talking about such a density, at least in the regions where they still show at ground level. Then number two, I think, will be the network of what I have called lifelines, and they are often combined with gigantic earthworks like the plowed area in southern Africa, which resembles irrigation system and is this of the size of a couple of decently sized European countries. Then third, I would say, third largest system of ruins would be the so-called Roman cities, together with the aqueducts, the numerous villas and so on. I would prefer to call them Romaic because sadly the word Roman nowadays forces us to make an association with the city of Rome, and I think that's mistaken. And as system or network number 4 would be probably the circles of South Africa, those without windows and doors. Although many of them are kind of earthworks and seem to be connected to the lifelines, they still kind of form a network of their own. Now let's start with analysis of the lifelines. This topic has been on the table, so to say, for a couple of years. It is absolutely ignored and excluded from the mainstream history. Just think for yourself, what kind of history is this if one of the biggest networks of ruins is not even mentioned? And actually the situation with them is so interesting and unusual that even most alternative researchers don't go into this topic. It's just too weird for them. It's kind of above their acceptable limits of what history should have been. I will not repeat whatever I have said about the lifelines in previous videos because it's just a lot. If you want just a resume of it, you can watch towards the end of the previous video the survivors episode on Africa that covers the lifelines in a good and concise fashion. So what we know about them for sure: they're amazingly straight. Too straight to be a product of some sort of modern technology that is accessible to the public, at least. Yeah, in secret what's going on, that we don't know actually. That's one. Second, it seems that some of them are still in use, and the best example is China. Over there we see them connected to some sort of modern installations. There is also one of those Chinese pyramids connected to all this. We don't know what's going on. But as far as the modern installations connected with them, they are clearly visible on Google Maps, Google Earth. But having said that, after all, it does seem that it is a historic network that is still partially in use. And these are those very same Nazca lines. They don't stop in Nazca, they just continue all over the world. And they are historic because sometimes we see them like on plateaus on the top, but then at the sites where the plateaus have eroded, they're no longer visible. At least in most cases. In some cases, they continue down cliffs. Yeah, even so, that erosion must have taken place. Um, I mean, the erosion of the cliffs before the lines were made. What else we know? That a lot of modern infrastructure and modern roads have been built on them because the lines at places are very, very fresh. People who have done field research on them and went on the spot, they describe, they have the feeling as if the layer of earth is very thin because no trees grow on them. They say they feel like as if there is cement and just a foot of earth on it, but in reality there is no cement, there is only earth. Just trees don't grow and we don't know why. And there are other changes that are effects of these landlines on the landscape. Like nature and plants behave differently on around such lines. Okay, what else we know about them? What kind of ruins connected to them? Sometimes in Australia and North America, on Google Earth, some sort of piles of stone or some sort of small ruins are to be noticed on the crossings of such lines. And they definitely seem to be connected with the lines only because they're seen, for example, in America, in places which are advertised as pristine nature reserves, yeah, without any intervention at all. So, but we have also well-preserved ruins connected with these lifelines, and these are the also very large network of temples of the Khmer Empire. So over there, lines and buildings and gigantic moats of really unbelievable proportions, they're intertwined. Okay, maybe they built the moats and the temples keeping the lines in mind, yeah, following the lines. That could be also possible, but I'm telling you, if you see especially the size of the moats in person, you will be inclined to think that the technology used for making the lines, maybe not the technology itself, or maybe the technology itself as well, but also the level of advancement of whoever did that is kind of adequate. And one more point which makes me think that the lines and the Khmer temples belong to the same people, same creatures, is that this network of moats continues as network of dead straight canals, and that extends throughout couple of countries in the region of Southeast Asia. You can see images of all this in the Khmer episode of the survivors. In this video I'm not gonna include many images, otherwise it takes me so much time to make a single video that at the end I have very interesting stuff waiting to be published, and it waits for like 3-4 years. Okay, so these canals, they're so wide, there is so many of them, and they're so dead straight for so many kilometers that it's out of question that the simple farmers built them, of course, but they're kind of very, very similar to this network of lines and also figures and all kinds of artistic work. It's not just lines, but the point is that both the canals and the lines are made with the same amazing precision. So the connection between the Khmer temples and the network of lines and figures seems to be very likely. And on the other hand, we know that the Khmer Empire was not really kind of independent empire actually. It was part of this bigger worldwide culture of the survivors. But what kind of, if they did it, what kind of technology did they use? Why we have never heard anything about this? Or maybe the angels, their gods, did something like helping people or somehow interacting with them, mapping the earth, or I don't know. Or was it actually the wave of survivors that came after the era of Angkor Wat and all the other similar megaliths all around the world? And which is this last wave anyway? Actually, this last wave I started noticing relatively recently, and I still haven't had the time to make in-depth video about it. I just mentioned briefly that the so-called neoclassical cities, which are found now on all continents, even Australia, a lot of in South America, what to speak in Europe and other places, they are all over. And it's recent findings, again, of Russian researchers really prove in a mind-blowing way that most of what we think we know about these cities is actually wrong. First of all, the evidence that they have been using uh, something like maybe Tesla style electricity or similar energies, at least for sure, very efficiently. The evidence of this is growing. It really seems we were trapped into gradually forgetting those higher technologies so that we can fall in this mouse trap of polluting petrol based or atomic fuel based technologies. This will be a subject for a completely new Survivors episode. So, could have those people mapped the Earth with all these lifelines which we are talking about? Possibly. I would say at this point it's not impossible, also because at places both in Siberia and in South America, they are like regular grids, yeah, quadrats, one next to each other, and their side is exactly a mile long. Now, mile is, of course, there are different types of miles, so this is not really a solid proof, but it is some sort of connection. A mile is something from the relatively recent history, yeah? So we may not be that far away from the people who might have created this network of lines. So, amongst the countless geoglyphs and lines, one I think can be very, very useful if we want to get down to the bottom of all this, and this is the Marine Man geoglyph from Australia. Now, I can't cover all details about it in this video. Sorry about that. You can find them yourself if you spend a couple of days researching the keyword on internet. But in general, looking at all the information about it and paying close attention to the attitude of the authorities towards it, I think it's a clear proof that the technology has either never been lost or it has been rediscovered recently by somebody who played or exercised with it, or this geoglyph could be also fully functional. We don't know how they even function after all. And by the way, that area in the southern part of the African continent, it's on the border of a couple of countries. The earth has been plowed with dead straight lines which stretch over a couple of hundred of kilometers without interruption. I mean, the resulting scratches on Earth, they are in reality hills, which are some, I don't know, 700 kilometers long, dead straight, and let's say half kilometer wide. I mean, this is absolutely mind blowing. It really doesn't get the attention it deserves. Maybe some of you who are in the region could study it. It's very easy to access. The access cannot be banned. It's so huge. Also, maybe you could take aerial photography. With drones, it's not only it's sometimes expensive, but also silly. Drone regulations are popping up like mushrooms in various countries, and in many of them it's becoming for normal people practically impossible to take aerial images unless they pay hundreds or thousands for licenses and waste few weeks of their life in filling out applications. But that's not the only way for aerial photography. We have miniature cams which are of satisfactory quality, and their prices start from €6, and those could be easily attached to kites. I mean, kites anybody can make even at home from an old plastic bag, and or helium balloons. Okay, helium could be hard to get, but then you can make floating balloons using just soda at home also. But kites seem to be the easiest way of cheap aerial photography. And not only this site in South Africa, also on my website I have over 400 sites which are still waiting to be explored. We don't have proper images to study them, to put them together, to complete this puzzle. If any of them is near you, I will really appreciate if you send photographs and, as I described, aerial images. I have made a new submission form, making it very easy to submit whatever you photograph. And also, when you submit it, if you wish, I can put a caption with credit to your work, and this will contribute to the popularity of your website or blog, YouTube channel, etc. Now let's take a closer look at the biggest network of ancient ruins, and these are the rock-cut cities, undoubtedly. I didn't start with them because many people think that rock-cut means primitive, and they would close down this video because if anything doesn't smell like Anunnakis or aliens with lasers cutting precise holes, then it's not interesting. Well, please don't cut me off because of that. Like, for example, in Choshin in Turkey, one of the rock-cut cities, there seem to be surfaces that appear to have been made with high-tech tools or something like that. I hope I can finally make proper photographs of it in March. And in addition, while I was preparing for the Bulgarian expedition, I discovered extremely interesting photographs of some very remote places. Officially those ruins are rock cut, but to me they look rock melt. So I can't wait to get there in April and see what is going on. And by the way, I organized that expedition because I knew there are some rock-cut ruins there, but when I started looking into how much is there, I was so surprised. It's like Turkey, it's like Italy, the regions with rock ruins is like, again, next to every village there will be something. So there is an entire video about the rock-cut ruins that they are pretty much a worldwide phenomenon. That video is a bit old. After that, I dis- uh, found out about a couple of sites in North America. One of them not only extremely interesting but also extremely beautiful. It's like an island with amazing beaches. So, although I don't guarantee you that is the most interesting historic ruin on my list of sites of interest, but I guarantee you that this is the most beautiful and exotic holiday place amongst all of them. Okay, the situation with this network of rock ruins and canals and so many other things is like this. Although there is thousands and thousands of them, most of them, not all, most of them look like chiseled out by hand and pretty simple to make. And that's why the penguins, they very easily fool the people. Oh, this is trivial, this is not interesting, this is just the basic stuff a primitive person can cut out of rock. And people believe this, but it is not true, because within these rock cut ruins, which I studied not only from photographs, but also I saw them with my own eyes in Italy, in Malta, and in Spain. There are three distinct styles of borders of making these premises, and also these typical cuttings in the walls. Some are rectangular, others are triangular. They are also very, very peculiar, and they're found everywhere where these rock cut ruins are present. So we definitely have three distinct styles, and they're present in these various layers everywhere in the same sequence. Yeah, the oldest is roughest, and we see like big holes, uh, like sometimes the size of concert halls, things like that. And probably these mysterious tunnels, which are very hard to study because they are locked, of course, they could be part of the same network. I mean, the mysterious tunnels which are on all continents, maybe even connecting continents, because sometimes people, there are cases they drown in a lake and then their corpse is found on the other side of the world. So this, how did it get there? Yeah. Of course, the channels through which the body traveled could not be necessarily part of this network. They could be also the channels for worldwide central water supply from God, so to say, which I mentioned in the video about Vyacheslav Krishninnikov. But it's just, I'm mentioning different hypotheses. None of these two is proven. So that's the oldest of the three styles of rock cut ruins. Very often they are found submerged underwater. They seem to be quite old. Then there is a second style. Then we see some sort of borders and all these niches cut in the walls. Maybe there were such finer elements even with the older stuff, but maybe everything is lost. We don't know. But with the second generation of rock cut ruins, then we see some sort of border decoration and even some sort of symbols, like older type swastika or sun symbols. They seem to have been carved by the dwellers, probably the original builders of the second wave of rock building. The scale then is not as gigantic as the first wave, but still we have for example, the giant bell-shaped caves. The biggest known are in Israel, but also we saw smaller ones in Spain. But again, over there, the most interesting parts were locked. So maybe in Spain they have even bigger, but it's simply not accessible. And then the third wave of rock cutting that seems to be relatively recent. Some of it could be even 2 or 1,000 years old. And we have some rounded arches or art which most people would describe as Gothic. This is a very recent addition to my megaliths.org directory of historic sites, and I find it absolutely fascinating because we have rock-cut ruin which combines a kind of Gothic-looking arch, which is typical for the third generation of rock ruins, with rock-cut stuff which is typical for completely different style. Do you notice on the left the stairs leading to nowhere, only part of them left? This is typical for much older stuff. Also, this seems kind of destroyed because these stairs, I doubt if that was the original design. Yeah, only half of them, it's kind of useless. I mean, the stairs on the far left, they really lead nowhere. And the full style of what we see here is one-to-one to cuttings we see in Sri Lanka, also maybe South America, now probably Bulgaria. And most definitely, we saw that a lot in Italy. This style has got some very peculiar elements of design, so it's really unmistakable. It is the same culture, the same creatures which made these things all the way in Sri Lanka. I've covered that extensively in previous videos with lots of photographs. And I find it absolutely interesting, fascinating that now we see these creatures who were making all these things. We see them make probably the first prototypes of Gothic arches. More about this third period you can see in the video report of the Italy expedition. And probably one of the last examples of the era of rock cutting would be the rock cut churches of Lalibela. Over there we see elements from the last period of rock cutting, and also we see a relatively modern architecture, so to say, along with the symbols of the later waves of the survivors. And the next video that I will be working on after I complete this one will be the survivors episode on Egypt. So over there I'll focus on things about ancient Egypt which very few, even alternative researchers, address, like you see the pyramids here, but what about the giant, that's often discussed, but what about the giant slabs which cover fields around them? So the sizes of these blocks on the ground, they're far more impressive than the stone blocks used on the pyramid. Some of them seem to have really unhuman proportions. Of course, maybe this was cast stone, geopolymer, or who knows, maybe even grown stone. This issue is not much addressed. Like, for example, on this image, if these are really slabs, this is unhuman size. And I think this is really one of the main directions that we should go in if we want to find out the true history. Because here we are like on the border of rock growing, rock cutting, and megalithic work, which is actually a later stage, not as advanced as the rock growing. And it seems there is quite a lot of it. Recently I was watching a video of somebody reporting from one of the Spanish islands about some megaliths, And by the way, the person mentioned, and I see on the ground like huge blocks, they seem to be like cut and left on the ground to stay as where they were. Well, maybe or maybe not. He didn't provide the footage. Maybe it's the same situation like Giza, like you see here, but since the blocks are so big, their size goes beyond this limit of imagination of how things should be, and people don't study them for that reason alone. And the alternative history researchers are making a huge mistake by not paying attention to the rock cut ruins as well. They just see a few isolated samples which look simple, and then they say, oh, this is not a problem because it can be dug out with chisel by a man in a couple of months. And they don't want even to see the full picture with the rock cut ruins. But they should see it because this full picture alone shows the naked truth about the mainstream history, which doesn't even care about the biggest system of ancient remains, of ancient ruins. What kind of history is this? This is a total joke. But the alternative researchers base their alternative theories on this joke as well. And that's why they don't want to look at this truth about the rock cut ruins. They don't want to look into details of them because, as I've covered in previous videos, most of the so-called alternative history is just an attempt to a little bit make a frisure on the mainstream history, make it look more exotic and more acceptable. And then the people also buy it because they feel like they're on the safe side, because you see, everything is also kind of scientific because I accept most of the truths of the mainstream history, and at the same time I'm more clever because I add a lost ancient civilization to it, so everything is fine. No, it is not fine, because in both cases the basis is rotten. The mainstream history is complete joke. And in the past, I used to say that the history of the last 200 or 300 years is 70 or 80% correct, and then of the last 1,000 years is, let's say, whatever, half correct, and the rest is joke. But I'm telling you, if you knew everything that I've been reading recently from the Russian researchers, even I will look like a mainstream person, because apparently even the very, very recent history is mostly wrong, like maybe even 90% wrong. And I'm not being just emotional. Later on in this video, I will give you some clues why is that so. Now let me get back to the original list of the four biggest systems or networks of historic remains, so that I follow some sort of systematic approach to all the material that I want to present to you in this video. Okay, so the third largest system of historic remains I consider to be the Romaic ruins. They are not excluded from history, but I just feel they are presented in an extremely misleading light. They want us to believe that Rome invented all this style and building techniques, although there is absolutely no proof of it. Just on the contrary, the best examples of this type of architecture and art are exactly in the places that are far away from Rome, and the biggest also cities and amphitheaters. Also, the quality of a building is far higher in the Middle East and in Africa. Rome is just mostly built of bricks. Yes, there are some better looking stones in the basis of the so-called Roman buildings. But this is something which apparently the emperors of Rome probably found in ruins, and they built their palaces on the top of it. I don't deny that there were emperors in Rome, but they were local and regional. For more details, why is that so? Please refer to the Survivors episode on Rome. And then very briefly about the fourth system or network of ancient remains, the South African circles. It seems there are millions of them. But again, we face the same problem like with the rock-cut ruins. No systematic study. Even the alternative researchers, instead of going to the fields, in many cases they just resort to Anunnaki fairy tales instead of actual interest in the historic sites. Now, when I say Anunnaki fairy tales, I don't mean to imply that the aliens were not actively involved in shaping the flow of historic events on Earth. What I mean that what they actually did and do even now very actively will not be revealed by reading dodgy books, but by exploring reality. First of all, aliens as such is extremely misleading term because we tend to call all races besides ours alien, but this is not true. And it has been made popular by the penguins, this term, just to endorse their theories of cosmology, which are as true as the history. But sorry, I can't cover this in this video. But they are also lie, mostly, not everything, but most of it. So all this Anunnaki story, which has turned into a standard refrain of not every, but most modern exotic hypothesis about the history, has been made popular by the writings of Zecharia Sitchin, who sadly was purely commercially interested person. Some of the stuff which he claims he has translated, actually he copied from Blavatsky, who, by the way, on her turn, probably was doing the same. I can't guarantee that, but it looks like that. She was just copying from older authors without giving them proper credit and claiming that she channeled it. So at the end, there will be some truth in all this because of the really old sources which have been turned probably a few times into a commercial fairy tale before they reach us. And I'm not telling you all this to discourage you from inquiring into the other races, but just on the opposite, to encourage you to start a regular meditation practice so that you can meet them face to face and find out the truth instead of becoming a statistic by buying the books of famous commercial authors, which only makes them rich and gives you a drop of truth mixed into a gallon of other stuff. And also, maybe here is the place to mention a story about Zecharia Sitchin, which very well shows his real purpose of doing all this. So, in his books, he published a photograph of the Sinai Desert or something like that, of some alien, whatever, spaceship still partially visible, but a very mystical. So, the research group of Vadim Chernobrov, they really decided to go there and they got in touch with him to take them there. So Sitchin, he just said that first they have to pay him a large sum of money and then he will take them there. Well, the sum was so large that the Russians couldn't afford it, and they spent a really lot of time browsing maps and stuff to find the place because there was a very poor quality aerial photograph of the place. So with a lot of work, they found it and they made an expedition. They went there to find out that there isn't anything special. There is just a natural stone photographed under a certain angle, so it looked a bit roundish or pointed, but it wasn't even an unusual stone as such in reality. So just to let you know how much is the credibility of the Sitchin's Anunnaki. And again, this is to encourage you to meet the real Anunnakis in meditation and from them find out what is the truth. And now I would like to tell you a bit more about the outstanding research of Alexei Kungurov. Who is he in person? He holds a very modest job in a factory. And a couple of years ago, he heard from some elders, the type of people that live on the fringe of our society. They think technology is from the devil and they have been hiding in the woods for generations. So this type of people told him that there was a nuclear war which wiped out an advanced culture in Siberia. Yeah, sounds pretty crazy, but Alexei, he posted some message somewhere on the internet. Does anybody know anything about it? And then first some person who works, I don't know, with some heavy equipment, he noticed the burnt stones, and then gradually other people joined. And the project grew to such an extent, exponentially, that within a couple of years they found numerous craters with radiation recorded with their dosimeters, with video, etc. They also made very popular the topics of the neoclassical buildings which are buried in clay, first only in Russia, now they on their side, and now I on my own found out that it is actually all over the world. And he is doing it absolutely the right way, not just sitting and talking Anunnaki nonsense, but everything documented, field work, real images and videos. Many people contribute as well. The thing grew to such an extent that even a couple of official TV channels made documentaries about these topics. Of course, they mostly stole his content and barely mentioned him, but still, somehow or other, all the millions of people in Russia at least heard about these things, yeah? And as far as the amount of evidence that they collected about this war some 200 years ago, which practically threw us into an ice age, before that the weather was much warmer, the amount of evidence they collected is just unbelievable. And the latest one was actually shocking even to me. They found some sort of research of some Swiss scientists. They have never even heard about his work or anything like that. They were just studying glaciers, yeah? Some glaciers in Siberia near the border of Kazakhstan. So it turned out that these glaciers, they formed within 2 years of accuracy of the time when the research group of Alexei Kungurov is placing this war in terms of timing. Not only it was formed at that time, but these people who were studying the layers of ice, because each year there is a new layer of ice, they themselves in their work wrote that there was an unusual layer of strange ash found exactly in the layers which belong to the years when this war allegedly took place. Another line or topic of investigation which Alexei Kungurov practically started, he was the founder, was the observation that in some of the old photographs of the neoclassical cities, the cities themselves appear to be suspiciously vacant. Of course, as expected, initially he faced a lot of objection from people who consider themselves rational, and for them, rationality means denying for any reason, true or not, anything which doesn't fit in their own belief system. But over time, he made lots of videos about it. He was very patient with all their objections. And in the beginning, he didn't sound very convincing to me about this particular point. But I have to tell you, after 2 years and a quite good number of videos about this, I would say that he's definitely got the point. Maybe there are some minor details which are not yet clear, but about the main point, I think he is absolutely right. I think very soon I'll make a video where I will collect all of this, going a little bit into the details, because some people always keep objecting that because if it was because of the shutter speed. No, it wasn't. Or all the photographs were taken only, 5 a.m. when there were no people. So in the video about the impossible statues, I mentioned a few strange things about the alleged attack of Napoleon on Moscow. It was quite weird, the full situation, but it turned out this is a very small piece of the tip of the iceberg, because people started looking into this war in general. Let's see what we can find in like museums, old books. It turned out that the medals, for example, given to Russian soldiers, they were with depictions and symbols of Napoleon. Wait, so they were fighting him and then glorifying him with medals, and not only medals, also monuments. And it wasn't only this; they also found in, because nowadays many books are digitalized, yeah. So in one of the latest videos that I'm myself about to study, it seems somebody found in an old book clear mention that actually was Napoleon together with the young at that time Russia. They were fighting together against the last pieces of Tartaria, and Tartaria are the people, some of the people, at least in that region, which knew the real history. They respected, to some extent at least, the old ways inherited from the old civilization. They had some of the old knowledge. All in all, lately I'm becoming aware that I'm trusting too much the mainstream history. It seems it has been much more inaccurate than I was aware till now. And it's not at all surprising, actually, if we think realistically. The war in Syria ended just months ago or weeks ago, and most people on Earth did not receive proper coverage about who is fighting who. I didn't dare to post anything about this on my channel because I saw how other channels, after posting the truth, within hours they were banned and closed down. This doesn't prove that everything that you will hear from me or Alexei Kungurov about this war which happened some 200 years ago is true. It only means that it cannot be wrong just because it was too recent and it could not be hidden. It could be hidden very, very easily. And by the way, what kind of people told Alexei about this thing initially? These are the Russian Staruveri. And Staruveri, these are the people who refused to accept the new paradigm. They live in isolated places. They do not talk with strangers, at least the more strict ones. You can go in their village, they may say hello, but they will not invite you to their house, or if you ask them something, they will reply short, but they are not willing to communicate at all. They have found out the hard way that speaking the truth outside their family circle results in prosecution and harassment, so they just don't talk with outsiders. So many of these Staruveri, they're of course not at all keen on modern technology. But the ironic thing is that maybe they know more about technology than a modern high-tech person, because they think that anything with barcode is directly handed out from the devil. And compare them with a very modern person whose life is practically completely under the control of various devices. So, such a person will be very proud of himself because he will know how to handle all these gadgets. And yet, he doesn't realize that the gadgets actually control his life and practically take away his personal freedom. For example, the military, they don't hide that they are ordering for manufacturing an army of drones. Tiny, tiny drones. They cost 2 pieces for $1, and they can target and shoot people dead. And how exactly does the targeting work? Of course, it can be on individual basis, like a given person, but also they were honest enough to tell us that they have also optional targeting by keywords or concepts that people use on internet. So, in simple words, if somebody is spreading an idea which is not to the liking of the drone army owners, they can just simply give a command and the given people will be removed. And these filters, like filtering information or ideas or concepts which go against the official picture that the owners of the army of drones want us to believe in, this targeting is already implemented. They're not even hiding it, that they are suppressing and removing information which they don't like. But those who had handed over their freedom to the gadgets, they will have to live under such conditions. They have no way out because they have always clicked, I agree, I agree, I agree when they use all the gadgets. So at the end, when the hour of agony comes upon the given person who has handed his life over to the gadgets, he may scream and pray to God and blame God all he wants, that you see, you have no mercy, you put me by force in such a situation that I cannot get out now. But God may not respond to his screams because it was the person who always clicked, I agree, I agree, I agree to the terms and conditions. So if we have a person living like a hermit in the forest who refuses all gadgets with terms and conditions, he may actually understand much better what technology is, even than the software developers who create such gadgets and yet is too busy to investigate who, after all, is the actual owner of the army of the drones. So this is a very interesting video about the DNA results, which seem to show some sort of connection between the DNA of the people with elongated skulls and the area around the Black Sea. So what I find very interesting about these results is that they confirm the story told by the Book of Veles. In terms of parts of the route of migration of these people who had special ability and higher knowledge. So it seems they started off in the area of the Black Sea and then spread all over the world, mixing and intermarrying often with the simple local people. But how did they appear at the first place? How did they land there? Where did they come from? It seems that, at least on what I have found out so far, that most likely they came from the area of the North Pole, where their motherland was submerged, destroyed. And based at least on some legends, which of course may not have reached us in their original and accurate form, but it seems that before their land was destroyed, they were also in contact with the simpler people who perceived them as gods. But after this destruction of their land, they decided to mix with these simple people which inhabited the rest of the earth. Very interesting. It sounds similar to what the Lumenians or Lumerians did according to the set channeled material. They also decided to disappear by blending with the simple cavemen who inhabited the surface of the earth and probably outnumbered them greatly. So Seth explains that the Lumanians decided to do that because they understood that their civilization is unsustainable anyway and is about to end very soon. So, was it the same with the people who came from the Arctic region? Once they realized that they can no longer stand up to their enemies who even destroyed their land, maybe after that they decided, okay, we are defeated. This war has been going on for too long. If it is impossible to live normally and peacefully as a community of people, let's try something else. Let's mix up with the simple common people and raise their consciousness over a level a little bit. Or maybe initially they just wanted to live together with the simple people without mixing with them, and that is even more likely because always in this type of cultures where we have some outsiders coming and educating them, we find rules which forbid mixed marriages. In other words, these people, the outsiders who came to educate, and very often they were from the culture of the survivors, not always, of course, but they always had this rule that we should just stay there and we should not intermarry with the local people. And it seems this arrangement worked for quite some time. For more details on some topics touched in this video, you can follow the link found in the description of this video. It is a link to a recent interview which was taken from me. So what I plan in terms of future videos is, as I said, the next is the Egyptian episode of the Survivors, which will be quite different from the original version. And then I plan to skip many episodes and go directly to the episode which deals with atmospheric electricity in the Middle Ages and after that times, which are usually considered pre-electricity according to the current history. And then the episode about Tartaria and all this dodgy story with the war of Napoleon. And by the time I finish those, it will be probably expeditions time. So after the expeditions, I think I'll publish the results. And only after that, in the summer, maybe I can return back to the survivors and hopefully make the episodes which I have skipped. And also, I would like to apologize to all the people who have been sending me emails and have received no answer. Unfortunately, it's impossible to answer all the email, not to mention complying with all the suggestions that you make in the emails. That's impossible to accomplish in 24 hours. Thank you for your understanding. But I will carefully read and possibly answer everything that is submitted through the contact page of the website in the specified format only. Like very short messages submitted on that page that I will read. And also I have made changes to those contact options. Now it is possible for everybody to suggest additional resources which are relevant to the topics discussed in my videos. And also I would request kindly, if you decide to submit any resource, to make sure that you have an image of the most important site or artifact or aspect of a given site when you submit it. Like, for example, if the resource you're referring to is about the Great Pyramid of Giza and something specific about it, then please kindly attach an image which illustrates the point you are making specifically and not just an image of the Great Pyramid in general. The image can be as a photograph or it can be part of a video, or the entire resource that you want to recommend could be a video itself. In that case, I would request you to use a timestamp to show the exact place in the video where the image is found. And you can very easily get a link with such a stamp when you click at this checkbox which says Start At. Also, I really don't want to offend anybody with my inability to cope with all correspondence due to time limitations, and that's why I remind you that the YouTube inbox is absolutely not monitored. There is no way to disable it. And also Facebook messages are not monitored either. But all messages sent in the correct format from the contact page of megaliths.org, those will reach me for sure.